Hi, everyone. Welcome to SCARE. I'm Taylor. I'm the Youth Programs Coordinator here at SCARE. And today we are going to dive into Momentum 3.4, Staying on Track. So if you've been with us for a while, you know that this is part 4 in our 4-part series. And this is the 3rd year now that we have done Momentum. And so if you haven't seen any of our previous ones, I highly recommend going on our YouTube channel and looking at our old Momentum workshops. There's some great information about anything career related or family related. And so as always, we're going to go over the definition of momentum and why we chose that as our topic for this training series. Momentum is movement. Momentum is energy. When movement and energy meet, they become your vision. As you visualize your future, your visions become your first steps. First steps become goals that you create, you can realistically achieve because you set your pace. You are the momentum for your focus, your passion, your goals for your family. As you create your momentum, you naturally begin to take steps needed to visualize your goals as actions and positive energy for your future. Be kind to yourself. And so, basically, when it comes down to it, the whole theme of this momentum is taking the small steps needed to give yourself the energy to move forward, right? We've kind of referred to things like a snowball rolling from the top of a mountain, starts off really small. And we can think about that as like a really small first step, like being part of Tribal TANF or going into SCARE. Or just going into SCARE itself doesn't make you reach your goals, but it is the first thing that kind of snowballs into helping you reach your goals. And so we take it one step at a time, and then we build momentum as we learn more through each step and each mini goal that we're able to achieve until we eventually reach the goals that we have for ourselves. So before we dive too much into today's momentum, we are going to do a review of the previous workshops in Momentum 3.0. So in December of last year, we had Momentum 3.1, Career Alternatives. So in that training, we focused on how to start a business, especially if you've never done it before, and just like the steps that can really help you think about your business and start it up on your own. There are some tips and resources to also help get started. We went over different types of networking, volunteering as a way to gain experience, and also network, and just different ways to take advantage of opportunities like that. In March of this year, we had Momentum 3.2, resumes and certifications. So just as the title says, we went over things like resumes and certifications, but more specifically, we went over things like adding experience to your resumes, how apprenticeships can help lead you more towards your career goals, resume building, and how to find your own skills and skills that you can use for your resumes. In June of 2024, we had Momentum 3.3, focusing on work-life balance. And so we went over the definitions of work-life balance and what that means to us, some tips for organizing to create a better balance. We also went over the importance of family time. And then we included a ton of resources on some easily accessible summer activities and summertime resources for the family, especially while the kids are out of school. And so that leads us to today, where we are doing Momentum 3.4 in September of 2024. So for today's topics on staying on track, there's going to be a handful of things we're going to go over. We're going to go over things like public speaking and presenting. We're going to do like a beginner's budgeting, staying organized for work, and then some methods for prioritizing and completing tasks. So first part, we have public speaking. And if you don't think you're going to be up on like a huge stage talking to a huge audience, that's not really the only times that we use public speaking. So you might think like, why do we need to learn this? Right. So some kind of like common examples might be presenting ideas at work. So if there's something that you've been thinking about and you want to bring it up to your boss or colleagues, whoever's around you, it just gives you the skills to be able to prepare in advance to help you speak about your ideas and what you envision. Can also be really helpful for speaking during meetings. I know for myself personally, ironically, because now I do types of public speaking with, workshops like these. I used to despise public speaking and it would make me so nervous. And even speaking during meetings would just make me start shaking and really anxious. But once I started to get the hang of it a little bit more and learn some tips for preparing and being confident in myself, it's becoming easier. Still not my favorite, but these tips can really help just build your confidence in skills like this. You also might use it if you're speaking to a class or to a group. You could be leading a workshop on something that you're already familiar with. But if you have a skill in a certain thing, like let's say jewelry making, right? You can have that skill, really honed in and perfected. But if you're trying to teach it as a workshop, explaining it to people and using it as like public speaking is like a whole other skill to learn. And even in daily life, it can be something fun, like making a toast at a celebration or an announcement to people. So, public speaking isn't just being on a stage in front of a huge crowd. There's a lot of ways that it comes into play and can help us with our other skills, just in other daily life activities. So, for some of the tips for public speaking, it's prepare and practice speaking. And it can be as little as like before making an important phone call, right? Maybe it's not public speaking, but if that's something you're nervous about, just think about what you're going to say, practicing over it in your head. If you need to write a script, do that, and just practice ahead of time. So that way, when the time does come, it just flows off the tongue a little bit more fluently. Also, if you're public speaking, actually like to a group, just make sure that you adjust to fit the audience. Because if I'm talking about a topic, I would probably talk about it differently if I'm explaining it to a group of, let's say, first graders instead of a room full of, 20-year-olds. So just adjusting, even though it could be about the same topic, but the way that I speak about it is going to be really different between the two groups. Also, whenever you're public speaking, even though it can be really intimidating, add your personality into it. I think people really like to see personality, humor, things like that. So it's not just so rigid. Also, don't overwhelm with too much information. It can be really easy to keep on going and overload with really, really great information. But depending on the audience and the topic, just make sure that you're not overwhelming them with too much. Be sure to pause and talk clearly. Use visuals when you can, make it engaging, make it fun. Try not to read it directly from a script. So I always think about it like with these presentations, for example, I have my points, but I'm not only reading from the screen. I'm kind of putting in other things on the side, and really, the screen is just to kind of like guide me in the topics and help you guys see the main points. When you're public speaking, be sure to be flexible and adjust it whenever you can. And I think a big tip for me is to watch other speakers, whether it's on YouTube or at events, and see the way that they speak to people, the way they take pauses, their mannerisms, even just the way that they throw in humor or stories into their public speaking. And kind of imagine yourself in those situations. So, if we're going to narrow it down, be prepared, prepare topics and materials beforehand, practice what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. Other one, be personable. Don't be afraid to add personal stories, jokes, or personality into it. Try to build connections with the audience. And lastly, be clear. Have clear topics, details, and summarize the main points. So now something that goes a little more hand in hand with um, public speaking can be presentations. It's not always the case, but in cases like this, like these workshops, these momentum workshops, We also like to include presentations so other people can follow along, and it helps guide me in the information that I'm relaying to you guys. So this is just going to be like PowerPoint and Google Slides tips, whatever program you use to create presentations. And so these are just the basic do's and don'ts. So for the do category, you want to have visuals, so have different pictures or something that makes it entertaining and engaging, kind of draws the eye to it. I don't want it to be just text on the screen because then if people are looking at it, they're going to get pretty bored pretty fast. Make sure you have clear headings and sections. So I like to put the overall like heading, what the slide is about or what the topic is that we're on, and kind of like the clear sections that separate, for example, like the do's and the don'ts. We see that it's underlined, it's off to the side a little bit. So it kind of separates those pieces of information. Also, yeah, bullet points are short sections, so not writing like a novel on here. Make it kind of like an outline for what you're going to be talking about. So that it matches up if you're doing it like any public speaking. Make sure to use clear font and colors so it's easy to read for everyone, especially if you're in a room and have a presentation on a screen. Make sure it's a clear font and color so that even people who aren't right next to the screen can see it easily and clearly. Have an organized order of slides, so just have it flow in a way that makes sense for the material and the topics. And try to keep styles consistent. So we're using the same types of fonts, same format, same colors, just to kind of keep it consistent throughout. And so now for the don'ts. Do not put too much text on a presentation. It can be really overwhelming. And if people are using it as a guide to follow along, it might be pretty hard to keep up with too much text. Don't use colors that are really harsh on the eyes. So if I'm using maybe colors that are a little too close together, that makes things hard to read, or things that I feel like I have to squint and really look at just to even figure out what the text is saying on the screen. Also for presentations, don't read the slides completely word for word. So just use it as a general guide and have your own dialogue and like speaking along with it. And then don't overcrowd the slides. It's not even just text, but I could put a million more pictures on here and it would look maybe a little more chaotic than anything. So those are just some basic PowerPoint and slides, like tips and tricks. It's nothing too deep, but just the general do's and don'ts. And so I did put a little example here of what not to do. So yes, the font is fun, and in theory, I love the colors pink and gray together. But if I'm using this as something that people should read, they're not going to be able to read it. A lot of this information is the same on the last slide, so don't worry about trying to read through all this. And you can kind of see that it's a little overwhelming. Not if I were to just see this, I wouldn't know exactly what it's about. I'd have to read through the whole thing. And that's why I like the headings and like kind of like sections to like organize a little bit more. So if you're doing a presentation, try to avoid something like this and make it a little clearer and easier for the audience to understand. So next up, we went over, presentations and public speaking, and now we're going to be diving into getting organized. Right, so these are, again, just some tips and tricks for getting organized. Everyone's got their own systems that are going to work for them. And really the important thing is to figure out what works for you. So these are just some ideas and information that I have and that I've looked up and researched and gives you guys just some options to choose from and dive into. So some of the things you can do to start getting organized, schedule as much as possible. So as funny as it sounds, even like for my work schedule, for example, I will schedule my breaks in or like my lunch at certain times just so I don't overlap it and I can see exactly what's going on. And so even with daily life can get so busy that it feels like we don't have enough time in the world to do everything. So if there are things that are a priority for you in the day, try to schedule it in. like, okay, well, from let's say 6:30 to 7 p.m. I am going to relax. That's my 30 minutes of relax time if I have a lot to do. So it sounds silly, but it can help you kind of organize what you're doing and make you use the best of your time. So, next up, in addition to scheduling, use reminders, calendars, and lists. So, it's so easy with all the chaos and like busyness of our daily life to forget things. So, you might forget appointments or meetings or things that you need to do. So, this is where I like to have reminders and calendars and lists and make sure that they're easy to find. So, whether it's on your phone or in person, maybe you keep it on the fridge somewhere that you see often, just to make sure that you know where it's at, you know what you have to do, you know what you have to get. And so, next up, use folders and storage systems. So, a lot of these tips I think can apply to both work and home life. So, for folders and storage systems, use some folders for any important documents. If you have certain things you need to hold on to, make sure that it's organized and you're able to find it. So, like, I keep some folders with like my rental agreements and rental notices. So that way I know exactly where to go and where to find it. Or same thing with like my car, my car documents. And then even just storage systems. So if there's maybe a few baskets of clothes, you can use them for different things. Just finding like a different storage system that works and kind of like helps get organized. In addition to that, try to keep your important documents in one place. So whether it's work or home, just having maybe one specific location where you would put anything that's really, really important. So any personal information, birth certificates, social security cards. Again, if it's things like for like your rent or lease or ownership car papers, anything like that, try to keep it in one place so that way if you're ever in a situation where you need it, you're able to find just that. And yeah, you can also break up goals and tasks into chunks. And so, again, that's like another theme that we've had in Momentum, which is breaking things up. So we could say that our overall goal is to, let's say, get a job. But to be more realistic, we want to break that up into different pieces, right? So I'm not going to only have that one goal. I'm going to break it up into, well, my first goal is to edit my resume. Second goal is to apply to 3 jobs and so on. So that's just an example of ways to break it up. And you can do the same things with other tasks. So if you have to write, like let's say you have to write a report on something and it's 10 pages long. Well, if you break it up into different sections, you could say, well, okay, do the first 2 pages, and that'll be like one thing crossed off the to do list. The next couple pages are another thing in the to do list, just so you can see exactly how much you've done and actually getting to check something off of a list, whether it's on your phone or like on a piece of paper. It really does something to our brains with reinforcing that we accomplished something. And sometimes even that can inspire us and give us the energy to do the next step uh, for that task or goal. All right. And then lastly, for getting organized, create routines that are realistic and simple to stick to. So, as much as we can get ambitious with doing a million things throughout the day, try to find routines that work for you and are actually sustainable for you to do every single day. And that'll just help you kind of stay on track, organize your brain so then your brain knows exactly what you need to be doing at those times, and so on. So, for staying on track, here are just a few phone tools. I know that if you love, the physical paper planners and calendars and notepads, that is great if that works for you. Personally, I also know that phones are something that we have with us nearly all of the time. So it can be a really good tool for keeping track of everything. So, for example, you could use alarms to help you throughout the day, just setting an alarm at a certain time. Like I said, going back, if we're scheduling in our relaxing time, for example, well, I'm going to set an alarm at 6:30 to remind me to relax, or I'm going to set an alarm to take out the trash, even little things like that. Or I'm going to set an alarm to, you know, join a meeting that I have, especially if it's out of the norm, just to make sure I don't forget about it. Also, phone calendars are a great resource to help stay on track. I did put a couple apps that I like for calendars on here. So the one on the left with the blue background, we have Simple Cal, and I personally like it a little bit better than the regular phone camera because or calendar because I can see the actual like name of the event that's happening. I know at least on iPhone calendars, it just shows like a dot and you can click on the day. But if I'm trying to plan things in advance or really get an overview, I like these apps for seeing everything. Time Tree is similar. The other thing that's really nice about it though, especially if you have, you know, coworkers or relatives or family, whatever, whoever it may be, Time Tree allows you to share the calendars together. So that way, if I add things, whoever I share it with is able to see it and they know that I'm, let's say, busy during that time or that I'm assigned to do that task on that day instead of them. So that way, things don't get forgotten. We know who's doing what. And it's a really nice way to just collaborate with other people. Also on phones, we have things like the reminders apps. So you can, again, put your to-do list and you can add alerts onto it so it'll notify your phone and you'll get a little notification reminding you to do whatever it is that you need to do. And then notes apps for just taking care of things. So if I can be really ambitious to think that my brain's going to remember everything, but I've also learned now that that's not the case. So if I'm like out and about and something pops into my brain and I think, oh, I have to remember to do this later. If I don't write it down, I might not remember. So I will write it down in my notes. And so that's just another easy thing for making sure you get things done and staying on track with whatever tasks or things that you need to do. And so, kind of aside from organization, we're also going to go over task management. So, we're going to look through some different systems and methods for prioritizing tasks and some other types of ways to have like visual reminders and find something that works for you to help you get what you need done. So, overall, my tip is going to be do not put more than 7 things on a to do list or any type of list. If we see more than 7 things, there's some science behind it, but if we put more than 7 things on a to do list, it can actually have the opposite effect where it'll start to overwhelm our brains. We won't know when to start or where to start. And sometimes, depending on what type of person you are, you might shut down and actually procrastinate more on doing those things. So try to keep the list shorter, realistic, so that way you can kind of like see everything get crossed off. And keep it manageable. So we're going to go over different ways to categorize and prioritize tasks. Some of them might be going over like the level of priority. There's a lot of different ways to categorize tasks, and there might be one that works better for you, but these are just a few examples. You can categorize it by level of priority, so things that need to be done immediately or that are really important, or it could be things that, well, I can put this one off for a little bit and the world won't fall apart. It could also be by progress status. So you can have a list of things that you haven't started yet but need to do, things that you're currently doing, and things that are done. You also categorize these by the time that's needed to complete it. So if you feel like you just need to be able to cross some things off your to-do list, it might be nice to categorize tasks that might take like 5 minutes, right? As opposed to like a couple hours. So then we can really easily complete some of the smaller ones. Or if there's a day where we have more time, we know that that's maybe a better time to complete a task that takes longer. And lastly, we could also categorize based off of the level of difficulty. So there might be a couple tasks that they both take an hour. One of them is a little more simple to do and complete. And the other one It's going to take some real brain power. So again, just going off of the level of difficulty can help prioritize like which ones you're going to do and help you organize when you're going to do it. So one of the first methods we're going to go over is called the Eisenhower matrix. And so this is really helpful for deciding like what order to complete the tasks in. So this is like when you would say, this is something that's really urgent or I need to do immediately. These are things that I can put off, but it's a more organized way of setting it up. So you can see on the left of the screen, we have a little chart and it breaks it up into 4 quadrants, 4 sections. And in one section, we have what is urgent and important. So if it's both urgent and important, that means we need to do that now. That should be at the top of the list. And it gives our little descriptions on these two, right? So those are tasks with clear deadlines and consequences for not completing it. But if we go to the right, we have things that are important, but not urgent. So our cue for that one is that any of those tasks we can schedule, right? We can decide maybe a better day to do it. And those are going to be tasks or long-term goals that require strategic thinking and don't really have a set deadline. So it's stuff that's really good for like future planning, knowing that things are going to be coming up and you're going to have to do it, but don't need to do it immediately. Then on the bottom left, we have our urgent and not important tasks. So yes, they need to get done, but they're not really anything too important. Right, so in those cases, we can delegate those tasks to other people who can get it done. That way, not everything is falling on you. So these are tasks that need to get done, but don't require your specific skill set. And I mean, in a workplace, it's really good to learn how to delegate tasks. So that way, if there's a million things that everyone's working on, we can kind of find like a better fit for the tasks and who can complete them. And then lastly, we have the not urgent and not important category. So if it's not urgent and it's not that important, we can delete it, right? Or just, kind of put it off to the side. That's not the important stuff right now. And those are tasks that distract you from your goals and add no measurable value. So it might be things that we think we need to do, but it really isn't going to help us get the work done that we need. And so using some type of organizer like this for tasks can really help prevent tasks from becoming stressful and urgent. So for example, if I go by this kind of like organization system, that'll help me to basically get things done in a timely manner. So that things that are in the not urgent category, but are important, if I do it right and schedule it in advance and stick to these schedules, then prevents it from getting into the stressful, urgent, important, due right now category. So once again, the system of completing these tasks and like this cycle, it'll actually become a lot more manageable and a lot less stressful. This one's pretty straightforward. This is just organizing tasks by your current progress. So there's like the 3 categories. We have need to do, things that are in progress, and things that are completed. And I like this, especially if there's, let's say, a certain thing that I'm working on that I can see where it's at in the process. So if I need to get, I need to get a really important packet of important documents together. I might have all of them start off with a need to do, but maybe some of them I complete at different rates. So I know when I've already started some of them, and it kind of helps organize my brain to know that I've already started them and I don't try to do it from scratch. And then it helps me to know when things have been completed and how much I have left to do before the whole project's done. And so another one, this one's not going to be necessarily for prioritizing the tasks, but this is a method that can be helpful for tackling overwhelming tasks. So this is when you just want a little more structure to focus on one task at a time. I know we always talk about multitasking. It can also be really hard because then always multitasking and not really getting one specific thing done because we're doing five different things at once. We'll jump from one thing to another, but it can kind of hurt the way that we finish tasks. So this is the Pomodoro method, and on the left we have the basics of it. So for this method, you pick a task, set a 25-minute timer. You work on that specific task until it's done or until the 25 minutes is up. Then you can take a 5-minute break or a 5-minute focus on something else. After every 4 Pomodoros or every 4 of those cycles, that's when you would have like a longer break. And so the basic of this is that it's easier for us to commit to 25 minutes than an unknown amount of time. And it kind of helps to know that, well, if I just focus only on this thing for 25 minutes, more often than not, you'll probably be able to get it done or most of it done. And then during the next cycle, you can decide if you want to keep working on it for that next 25 minutes or change it to a different task. And again, a lot of these things are really useful in the workplace, but also really helpful at home. So this is something that you can use for your kids, right? It could be 25 minutes of homework time, 5 minutes of iPad time or phone time. It can also really help to break up household tasks. Sometimes I like to do this for cleaning. That's going to be my confession for today. If I'm cleaning the apartment, I'll set one of these 25-minute timers because it's usually when I'm maybe feeling a little overwhelmed with cleaning the whole place, but I think, well, I can do 25 minutes. And I always get more done than I think. I'll set a 25-minute timer and be like, today is the living room and kitchen. And it just helps break up those tasks and kind of like sets aside the time to help us do these things. And honestly, you can try out as many variations of this as you want. The official method is like 25 minutes of task, 5 minutes of break, or like 5 minutes of something else. But we can find some other ones that work for you. If 25 minutes still feels like a long time for you, try breaking it up into smaller chunks as needed. That might work out better depending on like your style. So this is part of the Pomodoro method. This is an app that I use, and I'm sure there's like other ones out there, but this is the Be Focused app. So this already kind of sets it up for you where it automatically has it as 25 minutes of focus and then 5 minutes of something else or multitasking or breaks. And then it'll automatically register too that after you go through a few rounds, it'll automatically put in a longer break for you, a timer. So this timer shows you the progress and how far you've gotten through it. It'll give a little notification once it's done or once it's time to switch to another task. And yeah, I really enjoy it. And if this is something that you want to dive into, this is a great app for it. Or you could also just use the timers on your phone, but then you just have to keep track of the 25 minutes on your own. So I also want to talk about some tools for tasks that aren't just, I mean, there are some phone things, but also other systems that can help us organize it. So some of the like physical things we can use are Post-its, which for things especially like the categorizing where it's need to do, in progress, completed. It's kind of nice. You can have your little system maybe as a piece of the wall or a piece of your desk and have your different categories of need to do. And you'll see all your post-its there with those tasks. And you can physically move it into each other section as you work on it or complete it. Also, planners, using a day planner to not only keep track of events and what you're doing throughout the day, but also what you need to do. And just reminders. Like I said, I don't trust my brain enough anymore to remember every little thing that I have to do or every little thing that comes to mind. So I write it down, whether it's on a post-it or a planner. And there's also just calendars, a ton of phone apps that can help you get organized or complete tasks. So even just like scrolling through the different app stores to see what free apps there are. There's a lot out there. Again, using phone alarms, whiteboards, and then color coding things. That's something that I've been finding more useful recently for uh, just drawing focus to different tasks. So if you're prioritizing it, you can have maybe urgent tasks is red, or less urgent ones is yellow. Just a system that helps you see visually what is important right now or what isn't as important, and so on. So now that we've gone over some things for like organization and prioritizing tasks, really our last part of the day is going to be what I'm calling budgeting 101. And so this is going to be just the basics of budgeting. I'm not a financial expert. These are things that, again, I've researched or that I've done or seen from other people. Um, and yeah, we're going to dive into some of these budgeting basics. So, for the purposes of budgeting, I know that the economy is crazy, things are tight, but learning to budget and sticking to it can at least help relieve some financial stress. Maybe not all of it, but hopefully it can help relieve some of it. It can help limit unnecessary spending, help you meet financial goals, and even create financial goals. And it can help out with debt management. So, before we dive into the budgeting part of it, step number one, write down your financial goals, both big and small. And everyone's going to be at a different point in their life. And financial goals are always going to look different. Even for, even just for you, it could look different from one month to the next. Things change. So write down your current financial goals and then kind of like create a plan from there. So the first thing is to look at the past. So if you're new to budgeting or trying to get back into it, it's really good to look at previous spending habits or costs and expenses or income just to get a better understanding of what your like finances look like. So you can look through previous months, whether it's like on a bank statement, if you have that available, like through your online banking, it can help get a better understanding of any income for the month. So especially if income changes from month to month, it can maybe show like an average or what you can kind of expect for the month. It can also help you organize your essential expenses and see how much you're spending on things like rent, bills, mortgages, utilities, any of those things. Also, how much we spend on non-essentials. So going to eat out, buying some clothes, buying this or that. I mean, clothes are essential, but not always. And yeah, looking at past habits can help to plan for future budgets and know what to expect. So for spending, you can categorize it into a few different categories. For spending, there's going to be the fixed amounts. So fixed amounts might be things like rent, mortgage, where you know exactly how much you're going to spend every month. It doesn't really change. Even certain bills, right? The internet bill might not change every month. It's usually pretty consistent, so you know how much you're going to be spending on that. And same thing with subscriptions. You know what the expected costs are going to be every month, so you know exactly what to expect. But there's also essentials that aren't fixed. So things like groceries, where grocery amounts might differ every month. So we know that it's essential, that we need it, and we can expect that we're going to pay for groceries, but not always down to the exact penny. Similarly, gas and transportation, uh, we know that it can be essential, but we don't always know the exact amount we're going to spend on it. And then lastly, another category we can put our spending into is non-essentials, or what I'll call non-urgent. I think these things can be important, just not essential for our daily life. It could be things like eating out, meeting, especially if it's like a special occasion, It can be things like clothes. If you already have clothes and you're just looking for more clothes, I would call it non-urgent. So it's something that maybe you'll get in the future, but you don't need it immediately. Or even just little things like getting your coffee throughout the week. I go to Starbucks, going wherever. It is nice. It's not really urgent. And so now that we've kind of gone over how to break up some of the things for spending and how to categorize it, we can go over some different budgeting methods. So there's just going to be like four main ones that we're going over today. It's going to be the envelope method. It's going to be using preloaded cards, using your bank accounts to help with budgeting, and then just tracking and adjusting. So first one we're going to go over is the envelope method. And this is really good if you use cash a lot. You can separate cash into different envelopes for different purposes. Obviously, if you're using primarily cards, this could be a little bit harder unless you're planning to switch to cash. Um, but this is mainly for people who use cash primarily. So the idea of this is that you use cash from envelopes to avoid overspending on different categories of like what you need throughout the month. So, and we can have a certain envelope that is for eating out or an envelope for coffee because even though those things are non-urgent, if we have the means and we can budget for it, we can just still do it but limit it so we're not excessively spending. Or even things like with groceries where you can have a set amount for how much you are trying to spend for that month. And again, it's always going to look different. Income looks different. So the envelope method and any of the budgeting methods have to try to fit with your income as much as possible. But again, even if you usually use card for things, there are still ways to incorporate the envelope method just for additional saving or money methods, right? So I primarily use my card if I'm out and about shopping, especially not every place even takes cash now. But I do like to have some cash for, let's say, an emergency. So I do have like an envelope set aside for something like that, or it can be an envelope that's only for, like I said, getting coffee, right? Not every single category has to be put in an envelope, but even using it as an additional kind of method can really help. The next one we're going to talk about is preloaded cards. And this is helpful for if you want to try limiting your spending in certain categories without having to deal with cash. And this is also really helpful for anyone who doesn't actually have access to a bank. So what we can do is instead of using maybe your regular credit card, if it works for you, you can use prepaid cards to separate spending like on categories. So that way, let's say I have my income at the beginning of the month, I can go to the store and get a preloaded Visa card with a certain amount for, let's say, groceries, or a preloaded card for eating out or shopping. And then I can use that from there to kind of like limit my spending in that category. So the only things about this too are that if you're using a preloaded or prepaid like Visa card, you're not getting any of the benefits of credit if that's something that you are focusing on. But if that's not one of your goals right now, then this might work out better for you. So some of the pros for using prepaid cards are that it can still be used in online shopping or in stores or at ATMs. So it has a little bit more flexibility with how they can be used, whereas cash you can't use online, if there are things you need to do online. And not even all stores take cash. And like I said, what's nice about a preloaded card is that it doesn't require a checking account. So if that's something that you don't have access to, a preloaded card can help with still being able to utilize a type of credit card almost. Next, we're going to talk about using bank accounts for different purposes. So if you are familiar with your bank account and that's a system that works for you, you can even tailor it to your budget a little bit more. So you can have different accounts, disregard my spelling of accounts, um, for different purposes. So you can have your savings account, which you can use for either future savings, it could be for a certain purpose. You can use your checking account for immediate purchases. And even some banks now actually have a different type of savings for specific goals. So then it's separated from, let's say, your checking account. And you can have a smaller savings goal for an emergency fund or for traveling. And what's nice about that is if you're using your card and it's coming out of your checkings, it won't touch these other accounts. And so that kind of ensures that, that money is still aside if you want it to actually be separate from your checkings. And so lastly, we're going to talk about just like budget tracking and kind of like going through it. So this is really good just for this can also be used with all of those methods, and it's really good to have this as your first, I guess, visual of what your income and spending looks like, and then using this type of budget tracking to use, let's say, the prepaid cards or figure out how much is going to go in each envelope for the envelope method. So the basics of budget tracking would be writing down or typing up your income for the month. You can have every time you have a paycheck come in, you can put that amount on there. And then at the end of the month, you can see the total. And then also using whether it's receipts or your online bank accounts, seeing how much you're spending on different categories. So, like I mentioned earlier, some of the categories that you could break it up into are essentials, fixed expenses, non essentials. You could also just break it up by categories. So, shopping, home, food, which is, you might see that in different budgeting techniques also. So, however you want to categorize it, however makes sense to you, is the best way to do it. And doing something like this will give you an idea of how much you're actually spending in different categories. Whenever I actually do this, I call it hurting my own feelings because whenever I see how much I'm spending on non essentials, I realize, oh, I could have spent a little less on going out to eat. And it's not always a lot, but then I start to think about how some of those things could have been used towards maybe some other essentials or towards other fixed expenses. So it's kind of a good idea to see where your money's going and like a general overview. And then on the right side, we see kind of like the totals. So we can see how much is has come in for income. We can see the total expenses, and then whatever's remaining, right? So if your expenses doesn't match your income and there's actually leftover, in this case, there would be like an extra $70, right? And you can decide what you're going to do with that $70 now. You can put it towards an emergency fund if that's your goal. It could go towards shopping for new clothes since you were able to cover all your expenses. And yeah, like I said, this is just really good for a general overview of your income and spending and to help you reach whatever financial goals that you have. So aside from budgeting, did want to talk just a little bit about savings and funds, right? So if you are able to put money aside, or if that's one of your goals, this is going to be like a really great part for you. So first of all, you want to find out why you want to put some money aside. So it could be something like for a sinking fund, which is just a fancy phrase for future expected costs. That might be something like the holidays or car maintenance or school shopping. You know it's going to come up eventually. You just maybe don't have it there exactly. Um, so it's just really good to like plan in advance. And that way, this sinking fund, if you put money towards a sinking fund, it'll be there when these expenses do come up. So that way, when you do have to get that car maintenance, like an oil change, or you do have the holidays or birthdays coming up, You know that you already have some money set aside specifically for that. And again, it just helps relieve some of the financial stress around those times. There's also just general emergency funds. So having some funds set aside in case something unexpected happens. And then it could be something like traveling. If you're trying to go somewhere or do something, go to an event, just putting some money aside to be able to do whatever it is that you want to do. So there's a couple different ways to put money towards your savings or funds. And basically, the two categories that I've narrowed it down to would be including saving a certain amount in your budget. So let me go back. So that way, if I'm creating a budget here and I want to see how much I want to spend on these categories, instead of having just fixed expenses, essentials, non essentials, I can actually put in another category for savings. So that way, I already think about that as money going towards something and not extra money. The kind of like other way to do it would be to use your money for the month. And then if you have any remaining money left, or whenever you have some extra money, then putting that into your savings. So again, we went over the first two parts, right? So including saving a certain amount in your budget, putting any of remaining money into those funds. But also, if you aren't in a place where you're able to do that stuff very easily, even little things can really add up. So whether it's saving change and small bills in a jar, where it may take longer, but if you leave it there and try not to touch it, after a while, that stuff can really add up to tens, hundreds, you know, tens and hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars if you wait long enough. But it's a way that makes it much more manageable. Just like how we talked about breaking up goals into smaller, like bite-sized chunks to make it realistic, this might be something that works better for some people. So just change if you have a few dollar bills or like even a few quarters, throwing it in a jar whenever you can. And then eventually it'll add up and you can use that for something else. Even just like, let's see. So even if you're trying to save money and it feels like a really overwhelming thing, you can start off with a small change. So if you are someone who, let's say, gets Starbucks a couple times a week, right? It can be as simple as just changing one of those days, right? Changing one habit. So instead of buying Starbucks twice this week, I'm going to buy it once this week. And then that other $5 or $10 is going to go to my little sinking fund instead of my coffee. And it might not be coffee. That's just the easiest example because I know so many people who, myself included, can sometimes just get coffee as a habit or a last minute decision. And so making little changes like that can really add up and make it feel more realistic because it's like I was going to buy the coffee anyways. What if I just change my mind and put this money towards my financial goals instead? And here's a couple resources for just tracking money. Um, I personally really like the Fudget app. Sounds funny, but it's a nice way to categorize your different things. So it could be by month, and then it's really simple to use as well. There's not really a ton going on. It's pretty straightforward in each of those different budgets that you have. Like, let's say for the month of March, like it has on the screen here, you can see that it's broken down into salary or income. And then you can also put your expenses in there. So that way you don't really have to do the math, anything for your budget or like for your tracking. Towards the bottom of the screen, you'll be able to see your actual income for the month and then the balance of what's left. But if apps aren't your thing, you can also do some paper methods. And so I put just a little fun one on the right for a savings challenge because it can be easy to put $5 aside sometimes and put it off. But again, being able to cross something off of our list, or in this case, fill in a circle, it can help our brains to feel like we achieved something, like we crossed something off our to-do list. So Having something like this, again, breaks it up into bite-sized chunks where each circle is just $5 and makes it almost like into like a little game. It can make it more engaging for you to be focused on saving those $5. So let's see. Last but not least, um, again, this is for everything that we've talked about today and in momentum. Just being sure to reassess your goals. So, whether it's finance, whether it's work related, or whether it's life goals, you can write down your goals, break it up into manageable and realistic tasks, review it after some time because you want to make sure that you're going back to your goals to see if you're meeting your goals, or you can change goals as needed. Like I said, even month to month, things can change. So your goals last month might not be the same as what's needed for this month. And so those are my three main steps for reassessing goals. Make goals, plan the steps to reach them, review progress, and make changes. I hope you enjoyed today's workshop on all things related to public speaking, organization, tasks, budgeting, and finances. Um, Thank you for joining. And please fill out the survey for Tribal TNF work participation hours. The link is going to be in the description box below on YouTube, and we really appreciate it. And feel free to reach out with any feedback or any topics that you would like us to cover in these workshops. We want these to be beneficial for you. So I hope that there's something out of this workshop that's really spoken to you and that you're going to be trying out for your goals. Thank you for joining once again, and have a great day.